What's going on, everyone? Smith here, and this is my fall ride up in the Twisties. It was so beautiful out. I'd been meaning to do this for a while, and I couldn't really find a weekend to do it. And then the weekend I wanted to do it, it was raining that morning. Like, I had a day clear. I was finally going to do it, and then it rained that morning, and I was like, it's still not that cold out, and the rain seems to have dried up. I'm going to try for it. And once I got up there, it was fairly dry. I was riding pretty carefully just to, watch out for the leaves and everything. And the road being a little damp. But it wasn't bad at all. It was a little chilly. Not too bad. Had to put my winter gloves on coming back and get stop and got some coffee and warmed up. But it was cold, but not too cold. Not unbearably. Like, I've had way colder rides than this. It was the length of time, I think, really kind of started to wear on me because I was out there for a while. I have clipped together all my footage from this ride, and I'm just going to post that in one really long video for anyone who just wants to watch the riding footage without me babbling nonsensically in the background. You can have that. I'm going to post it at the same time as this, and just the scenery was just so beautiful. I was like, I should really just post all of this because it was gorgeous up here. Looking at the trees, there were a lot of people up there as well, just doing that, looking at the trees and everything. And it's that time of year. Although spooky season has now passed us officially, unfortunately. I feel like whenever there's an election, that always kind of overshadows Halloween a bit. At least a presidential election. The past couple of presidential elections seem to overshadow because Halloween just seemed to come and go immediately, and everybody's just talking about the election. But now that's over with, so next year we'll be able, I think, to take time to appreciate Halloween a little bit more. But now we're moving into the holiday season. You already hear the Christmas music coming around and everything. And I was wanting to talk about how I've been riding well over a year now on the road, and just some of the things that I learned from riding on the road and what I've noticed. And I think probably the biggest thing that I learned when I started riding on the road is how riding is dangerous, but it just doesn't feel as dangerous as you think it's gonna feel, at least. Or maybe it's you get used to it after a while, and you're just, as long as you ride carefully and you defensively and everything, and you watch out for other cars, it's really not as bad as you build it up in your head. And it's kind of why, I waited many, many years. I had already been driving for 10 years, and I always thought motorcycles were cool, but I never really considered riding them because it was just it's so prohibitively dangerous, you just don't even think about it. It doesn't cross your mind that oh my gosh, you wouldn't ride a motorcycle, you get killed on that thing. That's what you hear from everybody. But there are plenty of videos out there that cover all the riding statistics and why. Because yes, overall it is more dangerous, but it's not prohibitively dangerous, depending on where you are and how you ride. If you're in a high traffic area, obviously you're going to be at more risk. If you're drinking and riding, all of that is going to put your life in much, much more danger. But just riding during the day on not busy roads defensively, I've probably had a total of 3, maybe 4 close-ish calls with other cars since I've been riding. I wouldn't say it was oh my gosh, I nearly died or anything. But they were oh yeah, I almost got dinged by somebody. But aside from that, not really. I mean, not substantially more than I would have in my truck. Not even really noticeably more. There are a couple of situations when you're on those 2-lane roads, the car wants to get over and they don't see you. You're in their blind spot, which is something you got to watch out for when you're on a bike. Just it being not as, or not feeling as dangerous as I thought it would feel. I will say in that initial term, when I first started riding it, the first time I went over 50 miles an hour, or even 40 miles an hour on a motorcycle, I thought it was crazy. Because all I'd ever ridden was dirt bikes. I'm this is insanely fast. But once you do it for a while, it's really nothing. Like, you don't think twice about how fast you're going, because it's just like being in a car. You're just like, you don't consider it. You don't really think that much about it. But those first couple of months, getting used to going that fast on two wheels, it was very interesting. So I definitely think you need to be a confident driver. I think confidence in driving will translate, and experience with driving and dealing with traffic and watching what people do and their various mannerisms. I think that helps quite a lot. So I am overall glad that I waited as long as I did to take up riding a motorcycle. But yeah, so far, having a blast and being super careful, as you got to do if you don't want to end up on the ground. Always wear your gear, as I say. The other thing is getting through traffic. Like, and this, you would think is true, but just, like, I'm talking about legally getting through traffic. Like, lane filtering isn't quite legal here in the state of Georgia. So you can't really, like, weave in, but at least you're technically not supposed to just weave in between cars or just cut right in between cars. But the gap for you to get around cars, because this happens so many times to me when I'm in my truck, where a car will be in the fast lane and a car will be in the slow lane, and they'll be keeping even pace, or maybe they're at a little staggered, but not enough for me to get around in my truck. But if they're just a little bit staggered, where there's a gap I can get in my bike that's big enough and safe enough and everything, I can just go right around them. And I notice that so much now. Whenever I get in my truck, traffic really holds me way the heck up. But on my bike, I can just weave in between safely, right? Keeping the proper distances and everything, making sure the gap is wide enough for me to get around legally and safely. But you can do it much more efficiently and effectively than you can in a car. And traffic is substantially less of an issue because of that. So that's something very nice. Obviously, the fuel efficiency, that's kind of why I bought the bike. The fuel efficiency and the relatively inexpensive maintenance were the biggest selling points on me buying a bike, and that is definitely the case. It has been wonderful on fuel. And just the amount of traveling I get to do now. I can go all kinds of places very, very far out and spend like a couple of bucks in gas. You gotta watch those tires, though. Those tires will get you on the old price tag. But it is nice to be able to traverse great distances for very little in terms of money on a motorcycle, and it's just fun. The general openness. I will say, the wind blasting has definitely. I know people have put windshields or windscreens on these bikes, but I just could not bring myself to do it. I can't, because it's perfect being on a country road, and I just feel like the windscreen is so obstructive. Like, I love the minimalist feeling of, and it's kind of the reason I bought the style of bike that I have here. The Eliminator is very bare bones. You got your engine, you got the wheels, you got like nothing really going on in terms of the dash. You don't have all this fancy stuff, just a little, offset cluster gauge. It's got everything, very, very minimalist. And I like it. I like the minimalistness of it. But it comes with, things you're going to complain about. Storage is obviously a big issue for me because I don't really have saddlebags. And I know I should be getting saddlebags, and maybe one day I will, but right now I am content enough toting around my backpack. When it has little to nothing in it, it's really not an issue. And I do have cargo nets, so like if I need to carry bigger luggage, I can. But your capacity to carry things is also something you don't really think about, particularly when you're going places with your bike. You're like, oh, I need to stop at the store and get this, and this. Well, how the heck am I going to carry it? All I got's my backpack. And you got to go home and get your 4 wheels and then go to the store. So, the cold weather, obviously, and that I think I've mentioned a couple of times. The cold weather, or just the weather more broadly, is something that you really take note of when you get a motorcycle. You're much more in tune to the weather. And A lot of people, like, I almost never see people riding in the rain. Whenever I don't get caught out in the rain too often, but when I do, I almost never see people riding out in the rain. But me, I'll bring my rain suit to work, and if it's gonna rain when I'm leaving or something, I'll throw the rain suit on. I'll take off. It's not that big a deal, and as long as you ride carefully, turn your head every now and then, get those water droplets off you, you're fine. It's not that big a deal. The worst, by far, type of weather to be riding in is when it's misting. That is probably the most dangerous. Dark and misting. I've had a couple of mornings like that, and boy, oh boy, you talk about being a little nervous on the bike. That stuff is not fun, because the mist is just small enough to stick to your visor, but not get blown away by the wind. So you have to keep wiping it off with your glove, and you can't hardly see anything. And then it's dark out on top of everything else. Brutal stuff. Gotta watch out for that. I would not recommend riding in misty weather. That's a little silly of me to be doing that. But I'd be like, oh, it's not really raining, it'll be fine. You always talk yourself into it, particularly when you want to ride all the time. Now, I don't know if this is a bit of a location thing, and I have mentioned it before, but cars are very nice, at least to bikers around where I live. And even when I go out of town and I go to other states, I typically never really have an issue with cars like honking at me or anything. I don't ride aggressively, so that might have something to do with it. I'm a very defensive type. I don't ride people's tail or anything. I'm not trying to cause any fuss, just going along to get along, as they say. But people always give me plenty of space. It's very rare that somebody's like riding right behind me. It has happened a couple of times, but I don't know. Cars, just overall, I haven't had too much of an issue with people being rude or like not even seeing me. It's happened, like I said, only a couple of times. Another thing is parking, and that's something you think about, but you don't really think about. Like, I was like, oh yeah, it would be great to park on a motorcycle, but you really appreciate just how easy it is to park anywhere on a motorcycle, how easy it is to get around, and even the tightest of parking spaces, or places where maybe you shouldn't be parking there, but on a motorcycle, people don't really care. As long as there's no sign saying like absolutely no parking here. It's like a car couldn't get away with parking here, but a bike definitely could. Because people aren't particularly bothered by that. I haven't had anyone complain about any of the kind of unique places I park the bike. You'll never want for parking on a motorcycle, I'll tell you that. You'll never struggle to find somewhere to park on a motorcycle. I don't think I've had a great difficulty one time trying to find a parking spot with my bike. So that is definitely a massive pro to having a bike. There's a lot of pros to being on a bike. The only major cons, like, it'd be easier to talk about the cons. You're not as safe. You got limited storage, and you're much more vulnerable to the weather. And that's about it. And like I said, how unsafe you make it is kind of up to you. If you ride recklessly, if you ride too fast, I know these people, particularly on roads like these, like the twisties, they really like to lean the bike over and go super fast. And particularly if you're riding with friends, they're going to want you to go like really fast, and they'll pressure you. You got to watch out for that. Peer pressure is a real killer on these things. From what I've heard and read, not speaking on really any personal experience, the few people that I've ridden with typically ride very safely. So that's another thing to watch out for. Peer pressure can get you into some trouble. Aside from that, there's not really any cons to being on a bike. Everything's just a pro. So, maybe this should be more like just the pros of being on a motorcycle and why more people should ride, but I do think it's important to be having been a driver for a substantial amount of time and having a really good feel for the road and how to deal with traffic and everything. I think that's very important. So, I don't know. There's my little rant, and I don't know. Would we even call that a little rant? We'll say there's my little list of things that I've learned, and really maybe more of my endorsement for riding motorcycles. Well, that's going to do it for me. I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.